I have a kind of weird question for you to kick things off today. When you hear the words ancient mythology, what exactly pops into your head?
Oh, usually just the classics, right? Zeus throwing lightning bolts or, primitive people scared of the dark, trying to figure out why the sun comes up.
Right, yeah. We basically file that stuff under entertainment or, frankly, just bad science. We kind of assume we've outgrown it.
Yeah, we think of it as just early attempts at physics that got it all wrong.
Exactly. But I've been reading through this deep dive material on Gnostic mythology and cognitive science, and, well, it suggests we're looking at it all completely wrong.
Oh, so?
The argument here is that these weren't just campfire stories, they were actually cognitive technology.
Cognitive technology.
Right. Basically precision tools that were designed to program the human mind.
It is a pretty wild premise when you first hear it. But if you really look at the source material we have today, it completely treats these old narratives as symbolic software.
Symbolic software.
Yeah. The core argument is that you don't believe in a myth. That's the modern mistake. You run it. It's essentially an executable file for human experience.
Okay, which sounds really cool, but I'm going to need you to ground that for me. What does it actually mean for you to run a myth? Because usually, I just watch them in big superhero movies.
Right. So think about an operating system on your computer. You don't sit there and believe in Mac OS or Windows.
Right. You just use it.
Exactly. You use it as an interface. It bridges the hardware and the network. These sources argue that myths, and specifically the Gnostic ones we're looking at, were designed as the interface between your consciousness and reality itself.
So they're like a diagnostic tool.
A diagnostic and an operating manual. They mapped out exactly how we grow up, where our thinking glitches, and fundamentally how to fix the bugs in our own system.
Okay, so just to be super clear for you listening right now before anyone panics, we are not doing theology today, right?
Zero theology.
Yeah.
And honestly, we aren't even doing history in the traditional sense today. We're doing a structural reading.
Meaning what, exactly?
Meaning we are looking at the system architecture of the human mind, and we're just using these ancient texts as the blueprint.
Okay, I am totally in. So let's look at the first major concept in this architecture. The notes keep bringing up this idea of holism. Now, normally when I hear holism, I'm thinking, essential oils and yoga retreats.
Sure, the wellness industry kind of hijacked the word.
Yeah. But the text mentions that these ancient myth makers were acting more like full-stack developers.
That is such a great way to put it. Because think about how we operate today in the modern world. We compartmentalize absolutely everything.
We really do.
If you have a mental issue, you go to a therapist for your mind. You listen to a physicist to explain the universe. You vote for a politician to organize society.
And they are all in totally separate buildings speaking entirely different languages. My doctor's definitely not asking me about my political worldview.
Exactly. But in this ancient framework, those domains simply weren't separated. They were completely integrated into a single symbolic architecture.
So psychology is cosmology.
Yes. If they write a story about a massive war in heaven, they are simultaneously describing a psychological conflict inside your own head and a political reality happening right down on the ground.
So it's heavily layered.
It's all about compression. The sources call it narrative compression. Imagine taking the fundamental nature of reality ontology, the really heavy philosophical stuff, and zipping it into a single file.
And that zipped file just happens to look like a dramatic story about a guy named Zeus or a woman named Sophia.
Precisely.
So when we read it today, it's like we are trying to open a zip file with a basic text editor, and we're just staring at it wondering why it looks like total gibberish.
Right. We think it's a literal biography of a sky god, but it's actually underlying code. We are basically critiquing the graphics of a video game while completely ignoring the incredibly complex engine running underneath it all.
Because modern cognition isolates variables, right? We literally cut things apart to study them. But ancient cognition integrated those variables.
Exactly. They built meaning by showing how everything connects, not by pulling it all apart.
All right, so if we want to actually read this code, we need to know the programming language. And the texts talk a lot about the pleroma. Now, usually that gets translated as heaven, doesn't it?
Usually, yes. And that is exactly where we get tripped up. Because in a structural reading, you have to completely strip the religious baggage out of it.
So what does pleroma actually mean then?
It translates roughly to the fullness. So don't think of it as someplace with clouds and harps where you go when you die. Think of it structurally as the full stack.
The full stack, I like that.
It is the total integrated field where all your capacities are online and working perfectly. It's the ultimate state of coherence. And inside this full stack, you have these core components called eons.
Right, the
Yeah.
eons. And two big ones kept popping up in the reading that I think we really need to nail down: Logos and Sophia, because they really seem to be the main characters or the main functions in this operating system.
They are the absolute pillars of it. Let's start with logos. It is almost always translated as the word.
Which, to be honest, has always been a bit vague to me. You hear, "In the beginning was the Word," and it sounds very poetic, but what does it actually do?
Structurally, you need to think of logos as ordering articulation. It is the specific part of your mind that cuts reality into pieces and slaps labels on them.
It's the namer.
Exactly. When you look at a chair and your brain instantly separates it from the floor and the desk and says, chair, that is logos at work. It creates boundaries. It makes things sayable.
Okay, so Logos is basically like the lawyer in my head, the categorization machine.
That's a perfect analogy. It's the lawyer, or the taxonomist. It makes the world manageable by chopping it up into distinct parts. But you can't just have that. You also need Sophia.
And Sophia is usually translated as wisdom.
Right. But again, wisdom is a little too soft for what's actually happening here. It sounds like something you get from a fortune cookie. In this cognitive context, Sophia represents integrative depth.
Integrative depth. Okay, give me a concrete example of that so I can picture it.
Okay, so look at that chair again. Logo says chair, separate object. Sit here.
Right.
Sophia is the part of you that perceives the broader context. It senses that the chair is made of wood, which came from a living tree, which is deeply connected to the earth. It understands the entire field that the chair actually sits in.
Oh, I see. So Logos separates things, but Sophia connects them.
Exactly. Logos defines the individual part, and Sophia holds the whole. And in a perfectly healthy system in the pleroma, they are deeply coupled. You absolutely need to name things using logos, but you also need to feel their depth and connection using Sophia.
But as literally any IT guy knows, systems crash.
They always do.
And this brings us to what is probably the most famous part of Gnostic myth, the glitch. Sophia falls.
The fall. So in the narrative version, Sophia tries to create something on her own without her partner Logos. She separates from the whole.
But structurally, this isn't about some goddess making a bad decision.
No, it's describing a massive system failure in human consciousness. Wisdom gets uncoupled from the rest of the stack.
So you have a system that is still running, but the integrative depth module, the thing that actually sees the big picture, has essentially gone offline.
And when wisdom goes offline, nature abhors a vacuum. Something else has to step in and take over. Enter the demiurge.
The demiurge. Now, I have definitely heard of this one. In pop culture Gnosticism, this guy is the ultimate villain. He's the false god who trapped us all in the Matrix.
That is definitely the sci-fi movie version of it.
Yeah.
But the cognitive science take on this is so much more nuanced and honestly a lot more practically useful for you and me.
How does it reframe it?
It reframes the demiurge not as some evil demon, but as the first ego.
At first ego, so like a developmental stage.
Think about a toddler. A 2-year-old actually has incredible logos. They can point and say, no, mine, cookie. They have very high articulation. They can label exactly what they want.
They are very good at setting boundaries.
Exactly. But do they have Sophia? Do they have any real wisdom?
Well, if you have ever met my toddler, the answer is a hard no. It is just pure tyranny most of the time.
Because they completely lack integrative depth. They literally cannot understand your point of view. They cannot process the massive complexity of why they can't have a cookie at 9 in the morning.
So what does a human mind do when it is forced to regulate a world, but it can't handle the complexity of it?
It simplifies. It creates a rigid binary world. Good versus bad. Yummy versus yucky. Safe versus scary.
Wait, so the demiurge isn't some cosmic monster, it's just binary processing.
It is predictive processing gone rigid. The source material calls it unauthorized generation. It is a very basic regulator that takes over the system because the real wisdom is missing.
Wow.
It's not evil because it wants to be evil. It's tyrannical because it's terrified. It's terrified of the complexity it simply doesn't have the hardware to understand.
That feels incredibly relevant right now because we all know people, and honestly, I have absolutely been that person where we get super rigid and black and white in our thinking just because we're actually totally overwhelmed.
That is the demiurgic operating system in action. High articulation, meaning strong logos, but extremely low wisdom, low Sophia. It builds a massive wall because it cannot hold the tension of the field.
So if we are running on this buggy binary software right now, if we're stressed, rigid, essentially acting like metaphysical toddlers, what is the actual fix? The outline for our deep dive calls this next part the upgrade.
And here is where this material gets really subversive. Because a lot of modern spirituality will tell you that the goal is to kill your ego. Ego death, right? Just dissolve into the universe.
Yeah, that is the standard advice. Stop being a self.
But this model says no. That's actually dangerous. You don't kill the governance system. You upgrade it. You don't want no ego. You want an authorized ego.
An authorized ego, meaning what?
Meaning you want to reunite that logos, the naming function,
Yeah.
with Sophia, the depth function.
And when those two finally get back together, you get a totally new quality of life. The texts call it zoo.
Zoo.
Yeah.
It's an ancient Greek word for life.
I do want to pause on the linguistics here for a second, though, because the sources made a really interesting distinction between Zucha and Zeus. And they sound almost exactly the same to a modern ear. Are they related?
It's a very common confusion, and the texts actually play with that tension intentionally. Linguistically, they have totally different roots. Zeus implies sky or to shine. Zeus is strictly the verb to live.
But structurally, they are kind of fighting for the exact same territory?
They are. They both represent the animating principle of a system.
Okay, so Zeus is like the demiurge's version of power. It's light and bolts, it's command and control, very top-down.
Correct. Zeus is power over. Zeus is power through. It is the vitality that comes from true connection, not from dominance. It represents what they call integrative governance.
So Zeus is what happens when you finally stop trying to force the entire world to fit into your little binary boxes and you start dealing with reality as it actually is.
Yes. It is the major shift from panic to flow. It's the ability to hold the field. The demiurge has to split the world into good and bad just to manage its own anxiety. Zeus can hold the tension of the whole complex field without collapsing.
That sounds amazing, but how do we actually get there? Is it just about learning this diagram?
The source makes a really crucial distinction here between noesis and gnosis.
Okay, break those down.
Noesis is seeing the structure. It's exactly what we are doing right now in this deep dive. You understand the diagram. You see the map.
Right, I can point to the map and say, okay, I get it.
Right. But gnosis is when that structure becomes earned as your actual identity. It's deep integration. It's not just knowing about the software upgrade. It is actually running the new code in your daily life.
It's the difference between reading the flight manual and actually flying the plane.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've covered the software inside our own heads. We've gone from the buggy demiurge to the integrated zoo. But Section 5 of our dive takes this into a really cool, much wider direction. The sources argue that this structural reading is fractal.
Fractal, meaning that the exact same pattern repeats at totally different scales.
Right. So what happens inside your head also happens in the stories we tell each other, and it even happens in the physical buildings we construct. Let's talk about the Jesus and Judas dynamic, because that blew my mind.
This is fascinating. The source text brings up the Gospel of Judas, which caused a huge academic and media stir a few years back.
Because in that version, it basically makes Judas the hero, right? Or at least the only guy who actually got what was going on.
Well, if we stop looking at it as a historical newspaper and start looking at it as code, the source suggests viewing Jesus and Judas as a structural dyad.
Meaning they're two parts of one whole.
Yes, like a polarity.
Kind of like Logos and Sophia.
Very similar. In this specific model, Jesus represents interior truth. Judas represents public image or external function.
Oh, wow. So the betrayal narrative, it isn't actually about a bad friend stabbing another friend in the back for some silver. It is a dramatization of the internal tension between who you really are and how you have to function out in the real world.
Exactly. The narrative completely externalizes an interior psychological tension. We all have a Judas, we all have a public function that sometimes has to betray our inner truth just to survive, or to pay the bills, or to get things done in a demiurgic society.
That completely changes how you read the entire story.
Yeah.
It is not about good guys and bad guys at all. It's literally about the mechanics of the self.
And that projection didn't just stop at their stories. They took it all the way out into the physical world with monumental architecture.
We're talking about the pyramids, the giant temples, stone circles, the really big stuff.
Right. Modern people often wonder why ancient civilizations were so deeply obsessed with aligning their buildings to the stars.
We just think, oh, it's primitive superstition. They like the stars.
But remember holism from the beginning of our chat.
Right. If the code in my head matches the code of the universe,
then your built environment has to match that exact same code too. If you truly believe that interior order, meaning your mind, and exterior order, meaning the cosmos, are continuous, then building a temple out of alignment is a complete disaster.
it would literally be like writing a line of code with a huge syntax error.
It creates metaphysical dissonance. You're literally building a glitch into the operating system of your society. To build out of alignment would imply a break in the software. The built environment had to perfectly match the cosmic code just to maintain the integrity of the pleroma right here on Earth.
So it wasn't just pretty decoration, it was system integrity.
Exactly. They were physically building a user interface for the cognitive technology that they lived inside of.
It really makes you look at our modern world so differently. Because we have incredible technology today, we clearly have very high logos, we have smartphones, we have AI, we map the human genome. But looking at all this, you really have to ask, do we have the architecture or even the stories to hold it all together?
I would strongly argue we are drowning in logos and we are completely starving for Sophia. We have massive articulation. We can name and categorize absolutely every single atom, but we completely lack the integrative depth to make any real sense of it.
So in a way, we are basically living in a demiurgic society.
We are running a very high-tech version of the unauthorized ego. Everything is completely binary. Us versus them, red versus blue, 1 or 0. We've essentially built a world that mimics the toddler's tantrum, just equipped with nuclear weapons and social media algorithms.
That is a very sobering thought for you to take away today. We tend to look back at the ancients and just think, oh, look at those cute little myths. We're so glad we've moved past all that.
But the real question is, are we actually operating with far less sophistication than they were? We might have much better hardware now, but we are running a severely downgraded operating system.
So the takeaway for you listening isn't to go out and start worshiping Zeus. It is to seriously check your own code. Are you running on the binary, rigid, terrified demiurge? Or are you doing the work to upgrade to Zoo, actually holding the field, finding the connection, and integrating your depth?
It really is time for a system update. The tools are clearly there in the text. We just have to be willing to actually run them.
That is a perfect place to leave it for you to mull over. Thanks for diving into this with us today. Keep those systems integrated, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.
Take care, everyone.